Shri Bhadra Varsaman Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsamanya Sarva Siddhi Ahung Pakyuke Kudan Dagilu Pakyuke Sungdan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chikto Chingi Olo Makyuke Kudan Dagilu Makyuke Sundan Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chikto Chingi Olo Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakya Munye Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Swaha Sashipuki Choshimeto Tamare Ravalingashi Nide Gempadi Geshintu Mikte Ulwaraki Drokunam Dashingla Chupar Shoyidam Guru Radna Mindrala Kamnirya Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chodan Tsogi Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Nil Buddha
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. one of the characteristics, particular characteristics of the correct view of reality, the concept of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, etc. What happens often, quite often, that once we're listening, or as we're listening, everything's very clear and logical, but then maybe we finish the teachings, we close the book, and one doesn't understand anything anymore. And it's wonderful that while you're listening to the teachings, it seems clear. But this comes from the fact that we have a very deep conditioning within us. It's been there for a long time. So there's also an important point. Some of us, we have more of a predisposition for the correct view of reality. Chandrakirti describes that when one has a strong predisposition for the correct view of reality, which means that in the past, in past lives, meditated a lot, is already familiarized with the idea. The first times when he or she hears or comes into contact with the lack of inherent existence, a very, very strong emotion arises. It's said that one can cry, one can get goosebumps. It's one of the most important subjects within the world. The correct view of reality is central to Buddhist thought, and there have been centuries of debate, ferocious debates, and maybe most of us would say, I don't even understand the difference between the two, and because it's the center, it's the most important point, every detail is important. But I'd like to clarify something before we pick up the text. Recalling a verse of Shantideva, we can translate as, without entering into contact with the designated object, it's not possible to apprehend its non-existence. The example that I've always given, I mean, is there an elephant here in the Gompa or not? Is there an elephant or not? I'm asking. It's a simple question. Is there or is there not an elephant here? Some says yes, some are in silence, some say no. There's a statue that represents an elephant. There's also an image, a painted image of an elephant. But is there an actual elephant here? No. Are you sure? No. How are you sure about the non-existence of the elephant in the room? It's not a trick question. It's not because you don't see it. The reason why you're sure that there is not an elephant here is because you can imagine what an elephant in the room would look like. Because if I asked you something that you don't know and you're not able to imagine it, you don't know if it's here or not. Right?
fai in modo che quando noi diciamo c'è o non c'è un elefante, come facciamo a saperlo? Immaginiamo come sarebbe se ci fosse
So we can imagine what an elephant here would look like.
lo sentiremo muovere,
I mean, we would hear it, we would smell it, so we'd be able to
dalla porta principale se apriamo
maybe
due potrebbe anche entrare.
maybe if we opened up the main doors, they'd be able to get in.
Però per poter dire che non c'è un elefante qui, dobbiamo innanzitutto poter immaginare come sarebbe se ci fosse. Senza entrare in contatto con l'oggetto
But
designato.
without entering into contact with the designated object, the mental image of an elephant in the Gompa, we can't apprehend its non-existence.
Io non posso
I can't apprehend the non-existence of an elephant here if I'm not able to imagine it.
È chiaro questo?
Is that clear?
Perciò
So
quando noi diciamo
when we say that something is, when we negate something,
prima di tutto
first of all,
dobbiamo riuscire a immaginare
we need to be able to imagine the affirmation, the opposite of that negation.
non so se è chiaro questo.
Is that clear?
Se io ti chiedo
Because if I asked you something you don't understand, for example,
guardate sul tavolino davanti a voi,
look in
c'è una
front.
sciluma?
Is there a shiluma? Is there a shiluma in front of you?
Sì o no?
Yes or no?
C'è una sciluma o non c'è una sciluma?
Is there a shiluma on the table in front of you or not?
È uno scarafaggio in tibetano.
It means cockroach in Tibetan.
Che bene come
I like the sound of the name shiluma. Is softer than cockroach.
una delle parole che a me è sempre
I've always liked the word shiluma.
parole in tibetano che ha 3 sillabe.
It actually is one of the few words in Tibetan that has 3 syllables. Shiluma. So, is there a shiluma on the table in front of you? Are you sure? No. Okay.
Come sappiamo perché possiamo
How do we know? Because we could imagine what it would be like if there was one. So, how can I negate intrinsic existence? First of all, I need to be able to imagine it.
cosa succede
What would happen if
la immagine di Lama
the image of Lama Tsongkhapa existed in an independent, autonomous way, if it were inherently existent? What would it be like?
dobbiamo poterlo immaginare.
We need to be able to imagine.
Cerchiamo di farlo un attimino.
Let's do it together.
Se qualunque cosa
If something existed
tale autonomia
in total autonomy from everything else, and so doesn't interact with anything else, one of the first consequences is that it wouldn't change. It would be static.
perché
Why?
che permette
Because what allows for change is interaction.
se una cosa non
So if something doesn't interact, that thing doesn't change.
qualcosa esistesse
So if something existed autonomously, independently, the first consequence would be that it would be permanent.
ok? La immagine di Lama Tsongkhapa
The
è
image
permanente o impermanente?
of Lama Tsongkhapa, is it permanent or impermanent?
Se fosse permanente
If it were permanent,
centinaia di
100 years could go by and it would always be exactly the same.
quello che succede è che questa immagine
But these images interact with the air and the light and everything else. And so they transform.
seconda
The
conseguenza
second consequence, what would happen if the image of Lama Tsongkhapa existed in an objective way?
se fosse l'immagine di Lama Tsongkhapa indipendentemente
If it were the image of Lama Tsongkhapa independently of the observer, anyone who arrived would say, look at the image of Lama Tsongkhapa. Does that happen? No. And would appear in the exact same way to everyone. Does that happen? No.
quindi
So
due conseguenze
the two consequences of intrinsic existence be the same for everyone and they wouldn't change, and it wouldn't change.
questo è un punto
This is one important, it's important to be able to imagine how it would be if it were of intrinsic existence. And imagine anything, it is, it isn't, it's as an exercise. And there's some points that I don't want to get into detail. And if you want, we could just spend days on this, on these subjects.
andiamo sulle cose più essenziali
Let's go to the most essential points.
Qual è l'oggetto di
What's the
affermazione
object of
della mia
affirmation of my ignorance that grasps at intrinsic existence? For example,
suono della campana?
this sound of the singing bowl.
Il suono appare a me,
The sound appears to me as being of inherent existence, and I
mi afferro a questa
grasp at that appearance as being real.
Qual è la mia ignoranza?
Where's my ignorance?
L'ignoranza è la
The
mente
ignorance
che
is
si
the
aggrappa
mind that grasps
all'esistenza
at
intrinseca
the inherent existence of the singing bowl's sound.
Perciò l'oggetto
So
di
the
affermazione
object of affirmation of my ignorance is
dell'esistenza
the
intrinseca
inherent existence of the sound of the singing bell as it appears to me.
e questo così come
And
mi
this,
appare,
as it appears to me, is very important because sometimes we can spend a long time talking about, reflecting on the lack of inherent existence, thinking that the object of negation is the concept itself.
ci facciamo mille
We
giri in testa,
go round and round in our mind. No, things don't exist in this way. Everything's interdependent. And what we negate is an autonomous existence, objective existence, etc., etc.
però quello che noi dobbiamo negare
But what we need to negate is not the concept of inherent existence,
perché la
because
nostra ignoranza non si aggrappa
our ignorance doesn't grasp at the concept of inherent existence. When we see the image or we see the person next to us,
appare come
and it appears to us as being independent, autonomous, objective, of inherent existence, and we relate accordingly, what are we grasping at?
al concetto
At the concept of inherent existence or the appearance of intrinsic existence? The appearance.
quello che la saggezza
So
deve negare
the wisdom needs to negate the concept or the appearance. The appearance.
concetto ci aiuta
The concept helps us understand, but what needs to be negated is appearance.
esiste un pericolo
There's a danger when we study the correct view of reality and we try to meditate on it, called meditating on emptiness as if one were watching a show.
è il fatto che io vado a
I reflect on the fact that reality is empty of inherent existence because it's interdependent, etc. But I do it as if I were watching a spectacle, a show, looking at the concept. But what I need is to find within myself the appearance and how my mind grasps at that appearance. It's not the concept.
chiara la differenza.
Is that difference clear?
Facciamo un esempio che magari ci aiuta a capire meglio.
Let's look at an example.
Ok, guardiamo questi fiori rossi.
Let's look at these red flowers next to me.
Chi non riesce a vedere questi fiori guarda altri, tanto è lo stesso.
And if you can't see these flowers, look at others.
Vediamo i fiori.
So we look at flowers. We're looking at these flowers.
Se noi chiudiamo gli occhi,
If we closed our eyes,
qualche secondo passa,
a few seconds goes by, and then we open our eyes again.
continuiamo a vedere gli stessi fiori o no?
Are we looking at the same red poinsettias? Without philosophizing, directly.
Uno li ha cambiati o
Did someone change the flowers, or are they the same?
stessi fiori?
They're the same flowers, aren't they?
Persona a fianco a te,
Look at the person next to you, close your eyes for a couple seconds, open your eyes again. It's the same person, isn't it? Yes.
perciò la persona che ha a fianco
So the person next to you or the flowers in front of you, they appear
come essendo
as being
permanenti,
permanent or impermanent.
appaiono come se
They appear as if they were
permanenti.
permanent.
Effettivamente i fiori
But
della persona
actually,
sono permanenti o impermanenti?
the flowers or the person next to you, are they permanent or impermanent? Are they in constant transformation or are they static?
Sono in costante
They're in constant transformation.
Perciò,
So,
che se la
even
realtà che
if reality around us is impermanent. It appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to it as if it were. And this is a form of ignorance. If I want to eliminate this grasping at the grasping at this appearance of permanent when it's impermanent, it's not enough to understand the concept. I need to see the mind. I need to allow the mind that grasps at the appearance of not talking about a generalized appearance. We're talking about a specific appearance, because our ignorance isn't conceptual, where we think that people are permanent. Ask anybody: are people permanent or impermanent? They're impermanent. On a logical level, we know this. You don't need a degree in philosophy to understand that people are impermanent. So conceptually, we know it. But in spite of that, they appear to us as being permanent. We go to meet a person a week later, and we expect that we're going to meet the same person. And sometimes we're even upset because the person has changed, as if there were some kind of alternative. But to eliminate this mind that grasped at the appearance of permanence, first of all, I need to see the mind that grasps at that appearance of permanence to be able to deconstruct it and say it's not like that. In other words, if I don't know where the mark is, I don't know where to direct my bow and arrow. If I don't know where the darkness is, I can't direct the light. If I don't know what the sickness is, if I don't have the right diagnosis, I can't apply the right treatment. So an important thing is that before getting into the process of seeing that everything is of inherent existence, and there's no hurry to realize emptiness, first of all, we need to look at ignorance in the eyes, in the face. We need to see ignorance. Otherwise, there's the danger that for years, and we spend years philosophizing about the nature of shunyati and emptiness, and we stay on a conceptual level. But our ignorance is so sly, turning here and there. Geshe Wanchuk gave the following example. If someone is stealing, how can I say that I have found the thief? The fact that I know the person who's stealing, does that mean that I have caught the thief? No. I need to know that person and also understand that that's the person who's stealing. So, knowing someone and knowing that the person and knowing the thief, we need to put these two things together. So, on some level, we know that reality is empty of inherent existence. But we need to see our own mind that grasps at this appearance. We need to see ignorance at work And when we see ignorance at work, at that point, that's when we can actually catch him in the act. Catch him in the act. Like I've seen dogs, for example. What happens? I'm learning now with the dogs. I get home, they've destroyed something, and you can't yell at them now because they can't connect with a past action with being reprimanded. So you need to get them in the act. Similarly, we need to be able to get our ignorance in the act, see it. And we need to have the patience to watch. And when we see that it really isn't of intrinsic existence, and then we can apply the logic, that's what we need to we need to apply the logic. So what is the designated object? The designated object is the appearance of intrinsic existence. A little bit like it can happen that someone has some kind of racist prejudice, and maybe doesn't even realize it. And maybe I see in you, or someone sees in you, this prejudice, these racist aspects, and says, you have behavior that is quite racist. You say, no, it's not true. To be able to eliminate them, first of all, you need to be able to see them yourself. If you can't see them, then you can't do anything to get rid of them. So, an important point in this process is our ability to observe ourselves, understand that understanding that the wisdom that realizes the lack of inherent existence, it is not on a general level, but it's the lack of inherent existence of the objects that appear to me as being different. So we need to understand this concept of object of negation. We need to be able to see the elephant in the room to be able to negate it. Are you following? So let's go back to the text. Verse number 10. Gashin korde chunam tamcheki, jude nayang lua ton shing, mikpe tsetso ganyin kushikpa, denit sangye kepe lamla shuk. Those who perceive the inevitable nature of cause and effect of all phenomenon of samsara and nirvana, and in this case, it says nature of cause and effect, but it's making reference to interdependence. And here, I'm just going to leave it as a point of reflection, because not all phenomenon depend on cause and conditions. There are also phenomenon that don't depend on cause and conditions because they are permanent. Not all phenomenon are impermanent. Let's look for a permanent phenomenon. The generalized concept of impermanence. What is impermanence? It's the constant transformation of phenomenon. What was impermanence yesterday? The constant transformation of phenomenon. What will be impermanence tomorrow? The constant transformation of phenomenon. And in 1,000 years' time, it will be the constant transformation of phenomenon. So the generalized concept of impermanence is permanent. What's a chair? What's the definition of a chair? Let's invent it. It's not that hard. Can someone give me a definition of a chair? A material object. It's not something mental. Made to hold up the weight of a person, give it of a certain height. If it's very, very low, it's not a seat, it's a stool. And if it's too high, we can even say it's an object made generally of 4 legs, but can also be 3, and its function is to hold up the weight of someone seated. But once I describe what a chair is, do we have a generalized image of chair? And so all objects that enter in that description, we can say that that's a chair. Since a chair is in constant transformation, but that concept of chair instead, the generalized concept of chair is permanent. Actually, all generalized concepts are permanent. I can generate a new generalized concept that substitutes the previous one, but generalized concepts, they don't interact and they don't transform. The reason why the impermanent reality appears as being permanent is because we come into contact with objects, with reality, through generalized concepts that are permanent. Just to explain this, this is one of the best examples I found so far. I didn't want to talk about this, but I like this too much. And when we really understand something, then it changes something. Can you see this napkin? Yes? What color is it? Does it have 4 same sides? No, it's a little bit cut here, torn here. This one's straight, this one's straight, that one's not. Now close your eyes. Can you imagine the napkin? Open your eyes. Look at it well. Is it the same napkin? Spontaneously, without philosophizing. Yes, it is. Now, we can be here until the day after tomorrow. Still the same? And now? No. So in this moment, do you still have the mental image of the napkin before? You still have that mental image. Then you say it's not the same because this object cannot uphold that mental image. But do you have a mental image of the napkin now? Can you access both mental images? If I do this, it's a new mental image that comes out. Now, can you have all three mental images whole in 2 and then in various pieces? If the new mental image were a transformation of the first, we wouldn't be able to go back to the first. So mental images are permanent. Whereas objects that interact materially are impermanent. And inevitably, we perceive objects, impermanent objects, through mental images. It's almost as if every time we came into contact with something, we took a photo. That's a mental image. And what happens is when I see you, I take a picture, snapshot, and then when I go to see you a week later, who do I think I'm going to meet? That snapshot, because we relate to people and objects, etc., through our mental objects, mental images. So mental images are permanent. The tunchi, which means generalized meaning. That's the correct terminology. One key for this is updating our mental images. Remind ourselves that if I'm relating to people and situations and objects, that I relate to them through mental images, but the person is not that mental image. Are you following? What happens when the person doesn't correspond to that mental image that with so much kindness and goodwill we created? We can be upset. Oh, well, you shouldn't have been like that. You shouldn't be like this. Well, I am how I am. So every time that we live a situation or we see something, we create a mental image, we take a snapshot, like photo from an album. Years go by and the image is still there, but the person has changed. And similarly, we're blocked with our mental images and we don't perceive change. So it's very important for us to understand that we need to update our mental images and that we relate to the world through our mental images. And just this point, if you've understood this, that's enough for these 4 days. It's something marvelous that's helped me a lot. So, those who perceive the inevitable nature of cause and effect of all phenomena of samsara and nirvana there are 3 levels of interdependence. A coarse level, which means that it is as it is in relation to other interactions, cause and effect. Sound, what we see, our mind, our own mind. A more subtle level of interdependence where everything is what it is in independence of its own parts. The whole and a unit, they don't exist independently of the parts that compose it. The book doesn't exist independently from the pages, etc. And this level, this level of interdependence can be applied to both permanent and impermanent phenomenon. And then there's a very subtle level of impermanence, which it means that phenomenon doesn't exist independently from the value that is given by the observer. As I said before, these are subjects that we could spend months on. I'll try very quickly to explain something, and it might mean a lot for some, or just make some more confused. What are the parts? So let's take the generalized image of the chair. What are the parts that make up the generalized image of the chair? Generalized concept of the chair. So this generalized concept of chair, what does it depend on?
Da tutte le sedie che esistono.
It depends on all the chairs that exist.
Ossia,
Or rather,
esiste il concetto generalizzato di
there's
sedia,
a generalized concept of chair.
sedia blu, la sedia
There's
grande, la
there's a big chair, a small chair, a blue chair, all chairs
posso attribuire
to which I can attribute that name
sono in realtà
are actually the parts that make up that generalized image. Let me give you an easier example. Space, for example, is a permanent phenomenon. It's the mere lack of obstructive contact.
esiste la semplice
It's the mere lack of obstructive contact. If I asked you, for example, here,
vuoto o è pieno?
inside, is this empty or full?
È vuoto? Dipende? È vuoto d'aria?
Empty, empty of what? Is it empty of air? No, it's full of air, but it's empty of water. Yes.
Perciò quello che succede
So what happens is,
è che io posso dire che qui
I can say that here there's space
dell'acqua o no?
for water.
Perché c'è spazio per
Why is there space for water?
Perché
Because
non c'è qualcosa
there's
che sia una
not there's not something that would be an obstruction to water.
C'è spazio per mettere altro aria
Is there space for other air
senza togliere quella che c'è già?
without taking away the air that's there?
Direi di no.
I'd say no.
Magari se la comprimo.
If you compress it, that's another subject or physics. It's not my forte. Anyway,
C'è spazio per
here in my hand,
questa mano qua, c'è spazio per la bottiglia.
is there space for the bottle?
Qua. Più o meno, ma non ci sta sulla mano, sta sul mala, quindi sulla mano non c'è spazio. Perché? Perché non c'è spazio? Perché c'è qualcosa che ostruisce la possibilità.
No, there's space on top of the mala, but not on top of my hand, because there's something that's obstructing the presence of the bottle. And now I can say there's space for the bottle.
Tutto ovunque c'è
So wherever there's space, there's matter.
lo spazio, non è un vuoto.
So space is not a void.
Di ostruzione.
It's a lack of obstruction.
Quel qualcosa esista in quel contesto lì. Ci siamo?
You understand?
Quali sono le parti
So what are the parts that make up space?
lo spazio che c'è a nord, lo spazio
The
che c'è a
space in the north, in the south, the space here and there, all the spaces together make up the ability for space to exist as a generalized concept.
detto prima, non
As I said before,
più chiarezza o più confusione.
I don't know if this is going to give more clarity or more confusion.
Non entriamo adesso.
Let's not get into too many details. I'll just leave it there as a point of reflection.
Belle è avere dubbi.
It's beautiful to have doubts, to ask questions, to
Prendere le cose
not take things for granted.
quindi se qualcosa non vi
So if something doesn't, if you don't
ci sono stati
understand clearly, then wonderful.
riguardo la dipendenza sottile,
Um,
molto sottile, c'è stato un punto che io ci ho stato almeno un anno e mezzo. Cioè,
there was one aspect for me that took me about a year and a half. I really tried to understand the different debates, and one day I was together with my master in Tibet, and I got it. I was in the right place.
non c'è bisogno di avere
So
pezzi, anche se c'è
we're not in a hurry. So if there's something that doesn't make perfect sense, that's wonderful. That should encourage you to go and study and to look and to ask questions.
perciò colui che vede come
For those who perceive the inevitable nature of cause and effect or interdependence of all phenomenon of samsara and nirvana, anything that exists that is involved in the mental defilements or not, a Buddha or a sentient being or an object used by a sentient being in samsara or a Buddha in beyond suffering. Buddha is interdependent. The sentient beings are interdependent. Everything that exists in an interdependent way. When you're able to realize this, and thus that understanding totally destroys the grasping mind's object of perception, it destroys every illusory or erroneous perception that something exists in an autonomous, objective, independent way, that exists in an inherent way. So, if I understand that the flowers are interdependent, can they depend on causes and effect, and then at the same time not depend on cause and effect? No. So when I'm able, by seeing the interdependence, automatically I see that that phenomenon is not of inherent existence as it appears. At that point, I have entered the path of pleasing the Buddhas. I have a coherent, a consistent view of reality. So as long as the two realizations of appearance, so understanding how things are, or rather the infallibility of interdependence. The realization of appearance means everything that we see and perceive, we're able to see it in the context as interdependent. Anything that we perceive, we see that it depends on causes and conditions, it depends on all the objects that it interacts with, that nothing exists without interacting with other phenomena. And a side note, if someone wants to deepen this, even using some different terminology, there's a book that I read some time ago, or maybe last year when I had COVID, that I really, really liked. And it's a book by an Italian physicist called Helgoland by Carlo Rovelli. He writes this book talking about quantum physics. It has nothing to do with Buddhism. I mean, there are some physicists who seem a little mystical, more. Instead, Carlo Rovelli seems like he really has his feet on the ground. But in his book, he talks about quantum physics, and there's a chapter dedicated to Nagarjuna. So it's very beautiful. And the explanation that he gives to reality is extremely consistent with what I'm telling you now. And I invite you to read this book, because that way we can talk about the same thing with different perspectives and different terminology. It helps understand. And so what Buddha explained 2,500 years ago is now reproposed by the greatest modern scientists. And so this is and so Buddhists feel a bit proud about this. So here in verse 11, as long as the two realizations of appearance, the infallibility of interdependence and that of emptiness, the freedom from assertion. So freedom of assertion, is is freedom from inherent existence. So realizing appearance is seeing its interdependency. But when I say no, the flowers aren't inherently existent as they appear. That's the negation. So on one hand, I affirm how they are, and on the other hand, I negate how they don't exist, even if they appear differently. So on that of emptiness, the freedom from assertion are considered separate. There is not. So when we think that appearance and emptiness are two separate things, at that point, there is not yet the realization of the thought of the capable one, Buddha Shakyamuni. We're on the wrong path. But those of us who are here today, and as we've explained up to today, I imagine that it seems crazy that they would be two separate things. And at the beginning, we put emphasis on the fact that they are not the same. But for a long time within Buddhist philosophy, they were seen as two separate things, and it was an error that went on for a long period. There were many, many debates. And a consequence of that is falling into nihilism. There's no karma. There's nothing. You can do anything because everything's empty. Doesn't matter. This nihilistic view is a erroneous view that brings a lot of detrimental results. So this verse says, when these two realizations exist simultaneously, what are these two realizations? The one of the appearance, how things exist, and the one of emptiness, how things are not, that they are not of inherent existence. When these two realizations exist simultaneously without alternating and merely seeing the infallibility of interdependence completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent, then the analysis of the ultimate view is indeed complete. When we see the flowers and we perceive that the flower is interdependent and there is no other solution, it's so obvious, it's so clear that the flower depends on causes and conditions and exists in relation to everything that it interacts with, depends on its own parts. It doesn't exist independently from the value that is attributed to it. When that becomes absolutely clear, and seeing that naturally takes away any possibility for it to exist in an inherent way as it appears, when we're able to understand in this way, at that point we have completed the analysis of the view, and which means we don't need to study anymore. Now we need to meditate. We have understood. And it's a subject that one can study deeply. But at the basis, this is the conclusion. We're able to understand these verses, right? They're clear enough, right? Yes? No? The next verse. Furthermore, Sheyang, Nangwen Yute Selwatang. This is a little bit more difficult, but not too much. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you will not be taken by wrong notions holding extreme views. First of all, what are the two extremes? Existence and non-existence. The two extremes of our own reality. The extreme of existence, also referred to as eternalism, and it's when we think that reality exists in an autonomous, independent, objective way. That something exists in a way that's autonomous and and it exists in a spontaneous way and also a spontaneous way and also conceptual way. There are some world views that are objective and very materialistic. That's an eternalistic view. We could even go into more subtle aspects. The nihilistic view, or the extreme of non-existence, is the view is less widespread, but exists, where nothing exists. Everything is a dream. Everything is an illusion. It's all one. There's nothing. We're the ones living as if things were there, but there is nothing. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone talk in this way. I've met people who really followed this paradigm, this view, and what would happen, given that nothing exists, they felt free to do anything because there's nothing exists. You know, I can slap you, but I can because it doesn't exist. There's no suffering. It's an enormous mistake that unfortunately sometimes occurs when we say that reality is empty, that things don't really exist. One can fall easily into this view where nothing exists. There's a Chinese philosopher who said, I don't know if I'm a person dreaming. I don't know if I'm a person dreaming of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being a person, in the sense I don't know how real reality is, or if reality is a total illusion. There was this movie Matrix, for example, which gave this idea that was quite nihilistic, that everything was really an illusion. It depends on how you interpret it, but it did have that nihilistic flair. What can happen is that reality exists, but it doesn't exist as it appears. What is the illusory aspect of reality? What's the illusory aspect of the image I see in the mirror? The image I see in the mirror, does it exist or not? It exists. What do I think that I'm seeing that doesn't exist? My face in the mirror. So this illusory image, the illusory aspect is that I think I'm seeing my face in the mirror when it's only the reflection of the image of my face. So it's an illusory aspect. So the appearance eliminates the extreme of existence. So what is appearance? Appearance is interdependence. So the extreme of existence is where it's said that things are autonomous, independent, objective. But when I see that something is interdependent, I know that it is not of inherent existence. That's clear, isn't it? So, if the flower is interdependent, it cannot exist in an independent, autonomous, objective way. So, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence. And emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. When I say, this bell is empty, first of all, for it to be empty, the bell needs to exist, because if the bell doesn't exist, it can't be empty of anything. So when we say all phenomena lack inherent existence, they lack something. When we say all phenomena are empty, the first point is that all phenomena exist. And if they don't exist, they can't be empty. So when I say all phenomena lack an inherent existence, and I clarify the illusory aspect and what is missing, But once again, I clarify that the phenomenon actually exists, and in this case, I eliminate nihilistic view. So if you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, interdependence, and here, let's not open this door now, but the next steps will be to understand the lack of inherent existence of emptiness itself. Even emptiness lacks inherent existence. Even emptiness depends on its parts. Even emptiness exists independent of the observer, etc. In the book of Carlo Rovelli, he is very touched by the view of Nagarjuna, and he cites Nagarjuna. Not only all phenomena are lack of inherent existence, even the lack of inherent existence, even emptiness itself is lacks inherent existence. There's nothing that is autonomous or of inherent existence. When you will understand even that, you will not be taken by wrong notions holding extreme views. Extreme views, I like to imagine as if we need to find a very subtle middle way. And at the beginning, we're on one side, and then we go on the other side. We don't need to be on the far extremes. Before finding that balance in the middle, it's not immediate. It takes time. We need our direct experience. It takes time. And that's why there are many debates, many texts, many philosophical texts, many points of reflection, so we can more and more find ourselves in the middle way and not be taken by these extreme views of eternalism or nihilism. Once we're able to understand that even the lack of inherent existence, emptiness itself lacks inherent existence, at that point we'll be able to find this balance, and we won't find ourselves holding extreme views. There's a passage of a text that I like a lot that says, simply doubting, simply doubting inherent existence is a slap in the face of ignorance. Because maybe we say to ourselves, this is too complicated, I'll never get there. But let's look at the necessary steps to be able to realize emptiness. There are the steps called the development of the three wisdoms related to emptiness: the wisdom of listening, the wisdom of understanding, and the wisdom of meditating, to then be able to realize. Without getting into too many details on a superficial level, let's look at this path. The wisdom of listening is when we develop the so-called correct assumption, when I am sure that nothing exists intrinsically, autonomously, independently, that everything is interdependent, but I haven't understood exactly how or why. I don't have my own direct experience. I don't have a solid logical base, but I believe it. And I think that more or less we're all here, right? This is when we realize the wisdom of listening. That second point, the wisdom of understanding, is when we reflect to such a degree and we're able to develop a correct inferential cognition, when our logical certainty, we're sure that nothing is of inherent existence. And this is part of our own understanding. And it doesn't matter what anyone says, we understand that. It's not a repetition of what someone has told us, but it's our own understanding, our own conclusion. Once we get there, we've realized the wisdom of understanding. The next step, which is much longer, one needs to meditate on it and familiarize oneself. How can we meditate on emptiness? First, we do an analytical meditation where we take an object, because remember, we can't meditate on emptiness if we don't have an object of emptiness. Something needs to be empty. A generalized empty doesn't work. So let's take a flower as an example. Because let's remember that emptiness is where I negate what? The intrinsic existence of something, or the appearance of intrinsic existence. The appearance, but the generalized appearance is not there. The generalized appearance of something needs to be, we need a basis of emptiness. And so let's use the flower as an example. So I observe a flower. On a conceptual level, I see how the flower would appear if it were of intrinsic existence, which it's not. I do the whole intellectual process, how the flower is interdependent, how it lacks inherent existence. Once I'm able to get to this conclusion, I set that logical process aside. I enter into a state of meditation where I simply observe and I allow appearance to arise, and I allow the mind that grasps at appearance, erroneous appearance, to appear. And when I see the manifestation of the mind that erroneously grasps at the erroneous appearance of the flowers as being permanent, for example, at that point I deconstruct that mind. And so there's me in front of the flower that appears as being of inherent existence, but I know it's not. And this moment, the only thing that we're able to perceive is the lack of inherent existence. Because what happens is we are so conditioned to the appearance of inherent existence that we're not able at all to perceive something differently. Let me give you another example that could help you understand better. This object of flower, how many different things can it be? 10, 20, 100, 1,000, 1,000 people, 1,000 different ways of seeing. Innumerable possibilities. In every object that we perceive in every moment, there are innumerable possibilities. And as an observer, we choose one among the numerous possibilities. These are Christmas flowers. These are flowers or Christmas flowers. And then we believe that that possibility that we chose among the innumerable possibilities, we think that that is the reality. But try to see the flower, keeping in consideration the infinite number of possibilities. Put together, then we wouldn't be able to see the flower anymore. We're just not able to put these together. The fact that there's an infinite number of possibilities of existence, and the fact that they're Christmas flowers. So we're not able to see appearance of the flower and at the same time understand that it lacks autonomous intrinsic existence, because if it doesn't exist as it appears, then it's almost as if it doesn't experience. We're not able yet to put these two things together. And that's why it's said that when we meditate on emptiness and one is able really to perceive the lack of inherent existence, one gets into a meditative state where there's nothing other to the mind than there's nothing other than this lack of inherent existence. And one can stay in this meditative state. And then when one looks at the flower again after the meditation, what happens? It appears as being of inherent existence, but I know it's not. I've had a direct experience. It's like looking at a screen, a projection, and at a certain point, I can look behind the screen, and I see that there's not actually a person in front of me, but it's just a screen. And then I sit down in the movie theater. They appear as being people, but I saw directly that it's just a light on a screen. After one enters into this experience many, many times until gradually that appearance of intrinsic existence lessens and lessens. When one has a direct experience, one realizes emptiness when that experience is direct and no longer conceptual. At the beginning, we try to meditate on emptiness, and we can meditate on emptiness where our object of perception is emptiness, or is it the mental image of emptiness? It's a mental image, it's conceptual. When the meditation is no longer conceptual but is a direct experience, one has realized emptiness, and that's said that one has entered the path of seeing, and there is no longer the base of arrogance, anger, hatred, attachment, etc., and one actually gets out of samsara. And then there's the very, very long path to eliminate all the imprints of intrinsic existence. So what I want to share with you is seeing a path that's possible in front of you. All of Buddha's teachings are based on these 3 points: loving ourselves, understanding what's good for us, what's not good for us, what behavior is positive, what is detrimental. What do I really want? What is samsara? What is nirvana? And the second point is opening up our hearts to others, where we go from a state of egocentric or selfishness to a state of generosity, and we enter the path of the bodhisattva, and we practice the 6 perfections of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. And last but not least, there's the correct view of reality. The correct view of reality is the key to generate a mind that is directly opposite our ignorance, that grasps at reality in an incongruent, inconsistent way. And it's by eliminating ignorance that we eliminate the basis of our mental defilements that generate suffering. So in this way, when you have realized the crucial points of the 3 principal aspects of the path, once you have understood them well, seek solitude, which doesn't mean to go live by yourself in a mountain cot. It means take away distractions. We know where we should be putting our energy. Otherwise, we're just taken by distractions. What are the distractions? Problems to resolve.
Perché questo ha detto questo, perché quello ha detto quell'altro, perché succede di qua, perché non succede di là, è una cosa, è un'altra, è la vita. Quindi
The pleasures to be had. Life just goes by. So let's take away these distractions. Seek solitude and generate the power of enthusiastic effort, that desire, that strength to want to get out of samsara, to realize the correct view of reality, to generate bodhicitta. Become passionate about this, and by doing that, you will quickly accomplish your final goal, my child, my son, my daughter. With this, Lama Tsongkhapa shares with us, like heartfelt advice, the essence of all teachings. I wanted to share this with you in a way that seems doable, feasible. Otherwise, we just stay with these ideas that are far away. But we're not here to become we're not here to study Buddhist philosophy in an academic way. We're not here to become good Buddhists or to become experts in Buddhism, to have memorized everything that Lama Tsongkhapa has written, which is wonderful. But our main point is to transform, to shape our beings and give meaning to our lives. And the three principal aspects of the path give us this possibility. And as I said yesterday, I deeply believe that it's something possible, that we can all do it. Something important too, it's said, we didn't say this before, any practice that we do can be a sadhana, like self-healing, or tara, or any sadhana. I can make 100 million recitations of mantra. I can generate marvelous breathing techniques. That's all wonderful. But if that lacks renunciation, this definite emergence, it's not going to be a cause to reach, to get out of samsara. Anything I do, if it's lacking the motivation of bodhicitta, it won't be a cause to reach enlightenment. It's not even a Mahayana practice. You know, we have this great pride. Oh, I'm a Mahayana practitioner. If our motivation doesn't include bodhicitta, it's not a Mahayana practice. And if anything we do, any practice we do, if at the basis there isn't the correct view of reality, then it's not a direct antidote to samsara. And there's only one exception in all of this. It's said that in that first case, it's merits that come on the basis of an object. So when we accumulate virtuous actions, merits, even if we don't have the basis of renunciation, when this is done towards an object of extreme virtue, it's said that given the power of that virtuous object, it becomes an object, it becomes so because of the power of the object, that virtuous action becomes a direct a direct cause for our spiritual growth. And this happens when we go to a sacred place or make offerings to our guru, etc. But we need a solid basis of the three principal aspects of the path. If on that basis, I could even go around in the Gompa now, based on using the three principal aspects as a basis, and I can start singing Bibabu or Yellow Submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, and I have my own interpretation of this. In my interpretation, we all live in a yellow submarine. We live in... What does it mean, we live in a yellow submarine? So, it seems crazy that we live in a yellow submarine in this world. But we all live in a yellow submarine means that everyone lives in his own reality. We all live inside his own subjective reality. So, so sing Yellow Submarine and reflect on emptiness. What I mean to say is the way we do something is much more important than what is actually done. If at the basis there's really renunciation, this desire to get out of samsara, this strong aspiration towards nirvana, everything we do goes in that direction. And there are methods. I don't mean to say that reciting a mantra or singing Bibabub is the same thing, but Bibabub with the right motivation is better than a mantra recited without any kind of virtuous motivation. So this foundation is fundamental, and this depends on us, on our inner state that needs to be cultivated. So I invite you really to try to bring in your lifetime, your everyday life, this awareness, because it's a gradual process. There'll be a period where one spends more time in the first steps, this definite emergence. I'm really trying not to use the word renunciation. For example, working on the 8 mundane dharmas, on recognizing the all-permeating suffering, for example, working to not do non-virtuous actions, to do only virtuous actions, and then gradually open up our hearts. We allow ourselves to see others. We expand that feeling of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering to others. And then and as we do all that, we can reflect on interdependence without being in a hurry to understand emptiness. Let emptiness be a consequence of the interdependence. When you try too quickly, with too much intensity, to want to understand emptiness, then there's a great probability that one ends up in a nihilistic point of view. Instead, if we reflect on interdependence, and during our day we see things, we see our feelings, the things we see and that we hear, etc., try to reflect how they appear to us, how they exist. Does it appear as it exists, or is it not really like that? If we're able to perceive the subjectivity of the subjective reality, then we'll take enormous steps. Before seeing that reality, that subjective reality is subjective and doesn't exist in an objective way, first of all, we need to concentrate ourselves on its subjectivity, allow ourselves to see again, so that it becomes normal, and natural to see the subjectivity of things until it becomes absolutely natural to see the impermanence of what's impermanent. We see this, so we can see this mutual dependence that exists in phenomenon, like the here and the there and the big and small. The more we're able to do that, the more we'll be able to deconstruct that mind that grasps at that appearance. So I repeat, don't be in a hurry to develop wisdom. First, try to really catch and see ignorance well. Once we're able to see ignorance well, then it becomes easy to say, no. Okay. Personally, it brings me a lot of joy to reflect together on the three principal aspects of the path. Also because for me, it's really something that gives meaning to life. Otherwise, here we are, resolving problems, enjoying our pleasures, feeling bored here and there, getting excited because of this. And then, instead, when we're able to see that there's something that we can do that it doesn't just help us live our lives better, but we see that we're building something within year after year, life after life. This is the most beautiful thing. So, I invite you to read the text of the three principal aspects of the path with a certain frequency, also to not forget and to keep this connection alive, this path to follow alive. So let's read it one more time, and let's try to connect with the meaning from beginning to end. Every time I read this text, I like imagining being at the feet of Lama Tsongkhapa, who reads it to me as if I were in his presence. I bow down to my perfect gurus. I shall try to explain as best as I can the essential meaning of the victorious one's teachings, the path praised by all the holy victors and their children, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. Those who are not attached to the pleasures of samsara, those who strive to make this life of freedom and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the victorious ones, these fortunate ones should listen closely. Without a completely pure renunciation, there is no way to pacify the attachment that seeks pleasurable effects in the ocean of samsara. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, seek renunciation from the beginning, the very beginning. Freedom and endowments are difficult to find and life is short. By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is eliminated. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unfailing, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is eliminated. When having trained in that way, there's no arising, not even for a second, of attraction to the excellences of cyclic existence, and day and night the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of renunciation has been generated. Even if renunciation has been developed, if one hasn't generated pure bodhicitta, it will not become the cause of the perfect joy of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment.
Gli esseri
Swept
samsarici
away
vengono trascinati dalla corrente
swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma so difficult to undo, trapped in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such conditions, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment.
trovano in tale stato, genera la suprema intenzione altruistica di divenire un risvegliato.
Without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation and bodhicitta, it's not possible to cut the root cause of samsara. Therefore, strive for the method to realize dependent arising. Those who perceive the inevitable nature of cause and effect of all phenomenon of samsara and nirvana, and thus totally destroy the grasping mind's object of illusory perception, have at that time entered the path pleasing Buddhas. As long as the two realizations of appearance, or rather infallibility of interdependence, and that of emptiness, or the freedom from assertion, are considered separate, there is not yet the realization of the thought of the capable one, Buddha Shakyamuni. When these two realizations exist simultaneously without alternating, and merely seeing the infallibility of interdependence completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent, then the analysis of the ultimate view is indeed complete. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you will not be taken by wrong notions holding extreme views. In this way, when you have realized the crucial points of the three principal aspects of the path, seek solitude and generate the power of enthusiastic effort, you will quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. And with this, we conclude. The feeling that I have is that I've shared one of the most precious things that I have, that I've received. So imagine you've received a gift, but now it's up to you to use it well, to take care of it, cultivate it, like a plant. You have to put water and sun, etc., so that this plant can give fruit that you can then share with others. So this small booklet is much more than just some paper. Should be treated with respect, that which really gives meaning to life. It's the essence of all the teachings of Buddha. It's incredible to put all of the teachings of Buddha in 14 verses. It's something very, very special. So maybe someone spends his whole life studying the Buddha's sutras and not able to summarize it. And instead, we have this great gift throughout this uninterrupted pure lineage from Lama Tsongkhapa all the way to us. We have this opportunity to have this summary of all of Buddha's teachings. So I invite you to read the text again and again, reflect on it, and make the three principal aspects of the path an important part of your life. Now it's time for our final dedications, and we conclude our teachings. I like to thank all of you for being here with an open heart and an open mind. And if there's something that we've said that you find beneficial, please put it into practice.
Nimo dele tsendele nime kuyande Nintsen takto delekpe kuncho sumki jingilo kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol kuncho sumki trashishon.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Shabla asolwade.
Thank you, everyone. Those who will still be here, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30. My cold, allowing health permitting.